Before we come to questions, I am sure the whole House will join me in extending my deepest sympathy to all those affected by the appalling attack on Bondi Beach on the first day of Hanukkah. I have written to the Speaker of the House of Representatives in Australia to offer our condolences. My thoughts are with the Australian people and with the Jewish community in Sydney and beyond, including here in the United Kingdom. Right, order. We start with questions to the Secretary of State for Defence. Dame Neil Griffith.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the House does indeed join with you in your sentiments, remembering all those suffering from the attack. The whole House will also join with me in offering condolences to the family and comrades of Lance Corporal George, who died in a tragic accident last week in Ukraine. He served our nation in distant and dangerous lands. He did so with honour, with courage and with distinction, and he was a natural, gifted leader who lost his life in the course of freedom and peace. With my permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take questions 1, 3, 6 and 16 together. Our historic defence investment comes with a fundamentally new approach, a defence dividend that is already boosting British industry, British jobs and British communities. We've launched a £770 million defence industrial strategy to drive innovation, to create British jobs and to boost British skills. And today we're announcing the Defence Technical Excellence Colleges competition has gone live, backed by £50 million to help build the skills needed to tackle the threat posed by Russia and other adversaries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, when Jodrell Bank celebrated 80 years, we heard lots both about its contribution to science and its 150,000 visitors per year. So does the Secretary of State share with me the excitement at the potential for job opportunities at the repurposing of Cawdor Barracks in Pembrokeshire to form the Deep Space Advanced Radar capability? And will he meet with me to discuss job opportunities for manufacturers in my constituency, both for that project and for new drone developments like the Wind Racer drone and other defence projects?
So State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I do indeed recognise my honourable friend's excitement, as she puts it, at the opportunities that are created by the Deep Space Advanced Radar capabilities and the new drone developments and those that will bring to Wales. Mr. Speaker, because as we make defence an engine for growth, we're also putting UK at the leading edge of innovation in NATO. And I can announce today that UK Defence Innovation will invest over £140 million in its first year into new drone and counter-drone systems to protect the UK homeland and allies in the face of increasing Russian drone incursions, backing British small and medium-sized enterprises, British micro SMEs and British universities.
Andrew Ranger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Secretary of State has outlined, the new defence growth deals announced earlier this year promise exciting opportunities, particularly for young people entering high-skill engineering and new apprenticeship roles. With North Wales already hosting world-class defence firms like Teledyne Chaoptic, can you set out what benefits, especially in terms of driving economic growth and opportunity, my Wrexham constituency and North Wales more widely can expect as these deals are rolled out?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we are working with the Welsh Government, we're working with Welsh industry and companies like his and with Welsh academics and universities to work out the dimensions of a Wales growth deal for defence. This will be one of 5 growth deals backed by £250 million in this Parliament. And I say to him, new drone technology, autonomy will be at the heart and the focus of this new defence growth deal.
Good, Snell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the last government slashed defence spending by £12 billion in their first 5 years, it left the defence of our nation hollowed out and underfunded. Now, Stoke-on-Trent and our world-leading ceramics sector, who make vital components for aircraft, submarines and ships, stands ready to help rebuild the defence of our nation. So could the Minister set out how this government's largest sustained increase in defence spending will benefit companies and jobs in my Stoke-on-Trent constituency?
Secretary of State.
I can indeed, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend is right. Not just the largest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War, committed by this government, delivering 2.5% of GDP on defence 3 years earlier than anyone expected. We're a government that also said we would direct more of that British defence investment directly to British-based businesses, which we're doing. And we're delivering in the last year. In the last year, 86% of defence investment has gone to British-based businesses, and that is 6% in real terms, in other words, above inflation, than in the previous year under the last government.
Kevin Bonavia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Secretary of State knows from visiting my constituency, Stevenage hosts a thriving defence and space sector with over a quarter of satellites in space built in our town. Next month, Airbus Defence and Space will open Launchpad, a new facility in Stevenage, giving SMEs and startups space to work and develop technologies. So can the Secretary of State confirm that our innovative primes and SMEs will receive proper attention in implementing the Defence Industrial Plan?
I can indeed, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend is right. He doesn't just have some really important big UK defence primes. He has many very small, innovative firms. And that's why we've, as a new government, said we will set a new target for the proportion of defence investment going directly to British SMEs, and why we've set up a new SME growth centre in order to help them deal with government in a way that has been too difficult for them in the past.
Right, Father of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
I congratulate the Secretary of State for his efforts so far, but our efforts are still puny compared to when there was last a major threat in the 1930s. In 1933, we were just spending 2.2% of GDP on defence. Remember George Lansbury, leader of the Labour Party, wanted to abolish the RAF altogether? By 1938, we were spending a massive 7%. So will he commit himself to a whole new gearing up of our efforts? And he could start by recommissioning the bases, the old RAF bases, which have now closed down, which were opened in the 1930s, like RAF Scampton. Will he do that?
Secretary of State.
Well, the right honourable gentleman is right to point to the recent record, 14 years, as one of my predecessors said, of hollowing out and underfunding Britain's armed forces. I'm proud of this government's commitment, this government's investment, an extra $5 billion into defence in the first year, a commitment to reach 2.5% of GDP by 2027, and ambitious for 3% in the next Parliament, and alongside 31 other NATO allies, we've signed up to 5% by 2035 on core defence security and national security.
Dr. Andrew Mercer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Most of our allies and our industrial competitors have a system of offsetting to support their domestic defence capability, economies and jobs, and traditionally this country has had global by default. When will we see the detail from the defence industrial strategy that says that the government intends to bring forward a programme of offsetting to match our competitors?
So State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very interested to hear that observation from the honourable gentleman, who of course was a defence minister for a number of years, during 14 years in which his governments never moved to do any sort of offsetting policy. We're consulting on that now. We feel it's got an important role to play in Britain's future and the future of British industry. That closes in the new year, and we'll look to make announcements soon after that.
Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The world is rearming at a rapid pace as we see at the moment. They're building the defence industrial base, and it's fair to say the UK is starting to fall behind some of our NATO allies. Does the Secretary of State believe that the current funding from 2027, 2030 and onwards meet the current needs to prepare us for war, should the need be there?
So State.
I do indeed, and I just say to the honourable gentleman, because he knows as much in this House about defence as anyone else, and I pay tribute to the work he does also on the NATO Parliamentary Assembly delegation. The commitment that this government has made in our first year to increasing defence spending by a largest sustained amount since the end of the Cold War is a historic move. Our commitment alongside NATO allies to increase by 2035 what we produce on what we put to national security to 5% is part of strengthening the NATO deterrence, strengthening NATO defence, and our strategic defence review allows us to map out a way of making our own forces more ready to fight, better able to deter.
In room.
We were told that the Defence Investment Plan would be available before the Christmas recess. Could I ask the Secretary of State what day this week it will be announced?
Mr. Speaker, we're working flat out between now and the end of the year to finalise the Defence Investment Plan. He will appreciate, even though he's a new member of this House, but serving on the Defence Select Committee, he will appreciate the scale of the decisions we need to make. He will also appreciate the scale of the problems that we're facing. A programme from the last government that was overcommitted, underfunded and unsuited to meet the threats that we face in the future.
Secretary of State James Cartledge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the opposition, can I join you in expressing our total condemnation of the horrific Bondi Beach terrorist attack? We must stand united in this House against anti-Semitism in all its forms. Can I also offer our condolences to all affected, both at Bondi and Brown University, and to the family and friends of Lance Corporal George Healey, and we echo the Secretary of State's sentiments in respect of his service to our country. Can I just echo the question from the Honourable Gentleman? It's a very simple one, Mr. Speaker. Specifically, will the Defence Investment Plan be published before the rise of the House on Thursday, yes or no?
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, the answer is simple. The answer is the same as I gave to the Honourable Gentleman. We're working flat out between now and the end of the year to finalise the Defence Investment Plan, and he, of all people, having been responsible for deep problems and programmes beset by deep-run failures like Ajax, he will appreciate the scale of the challenge that we face.
James Cartledge.
Speaker, the Secretary of State seriously sitting there saying he doesn't know his diary for the rest of the week? He can ask one of the other ministers, he could ask one of the SPADs or the officials. Surely he knows whether later this week, Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday, he'll be standing up to give the most important defence statement of the year. It's extraordinary. But just to remind the House, Mr. Speaker, in June, from that dispatch box, he promised that the Defence Investment Plan would be, and I quote, completed and published in the autumn. So it's already late, just like the SDR, just like the Defence Industrial Strategy, and just like the housing strategy. Doesn't this illustrate perfectly why the Defence Select Committee said that when it comes to war readiness, Labour are moving at a glacial pace?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the House will know to take no lessons from the Honourable Gentleman. His munitions strategy when he was in government was often promised and never published. His drone strategy had more pictures than pages and no funding. His government's defence funding plan was published as an election gimmick just weeks before the election and in 14 years was never delivered. On the Defence Investment Plan, we are working flat out between now and the end of the year to finalise this work.
James McCleary, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Mr. Speaker, at a time of war, does the Secretary of State agree with me that this is precisely the moment for the UK to be working with our European allies, even as Putin tries to divide us? And if so, can he confirm that the UK rejected access to the €150 billion EU Safe Defence Fund at a proposed cost of about £2 billion, the same amount the previous government paid for access to the Horizon Fund, and set out whether that is the correct figure, and explain whether his department has estimated how much to have flowed to the UK defence sector through participation, boosting growth and security with our closest neighbour.
Mr. Speaker, we signed the European Union Security and Defence Partnership in May. We committed ourselves to negotiate with the European Union for access to the safe funding arrangements. We said from the start we recognised there would be a financial contribution for the UK to pay, but we said from the start also it needed to be good value for money for the British taxpayers and good value for money for British industry. It did not meet those tests. We were unable to reach a deal with the European Union, but we will continue to back great British defence industrial firms as they sell into Europe, and we will strike bilateral deals that allow us to do a great deal more beyond the SAFE programme in the years to come.
Greg Smith.
Question 2, sir.
Secretary of State.
Thank you. With the permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to answer question 2 and 9 together. This summer, the UK joined all other 31 NATO nations to agree the new NATO benchmark of 5% spending on national security by 2035. This followed this government's announcement of the largest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the Secretary of State for that answer. But it's curious to see what is and is not in the Red Book from the budget we've just had. Because page 88 shows in intricate detail just how big the welfare budget is going to get from the scrapping of the two-child benefit cap. But there is no such analysis anywhere in that Red Book on defence spending. So can the Secretary of State set out clearly at that dispatch box when the UK will hit the domestic 3% target and when we will ultimately get to that 5% target? In what financial year?
Thursday.
Mr. Speaker, we've made the commitment to the 5% target by 2035, like all 31 other allies. This is a government that's already put an extra $5 billion in the first year, that is going to hit 2.6% by 2027, 3 years earlier than anyone expected. We have an ambition for 3% in the next Parliament. This is a rising profile of defence investment over the next decade, and it puts an end to 14 years of the British Armed Forces being hollowed out and underfunded under Tory governments.
Peter Fortune.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was very troubling just then to hear it explains that the Minister can talk with exactitude on the future of welfare spending, but not defence spending, unless I misheard the answer to my honourable friend. I would remind him that the last time that the government spent 3% on defence spending was 1996 under a Conservative government. So I asked the Minister, and the Minister is very eloquent, but I would like him to be exact. When specifically can we expect to hit 3% of spending? In which financial year?
Same state.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, if he wants to change record, his government's had 14 years to raise defence spending. It comes to this government to raise it back to 2.5%, the level that was there in 2010 when Labour was last in government, and we will hit 3% in the next Parliament.
Derek Twigg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to put on record my thanks and appreciation to the Secretary of State and his ministerial team for the work they're doing to improve our defence capabilities and leadership in NATO and Europe, and also the defence industrial base. We hear from the side opposite, of course, who are responsible for the massive underspending in defence. However, I think we have to move on from that now. It is clear that the threats we face today and what we're hearing today and throughout the coming months in terms of what Russia and other adversaries are doing, we need now to accelerate our spending on defence as soon as possible. So can I ask the Secretary of State to do all he can to ensure we get more resources into defence so we actually can maintain our leadership position in Europe and actually have the armed forces fit to deal with the threats we face?
So State.
That's exactly what my honourable friend urges me to do, that we are doing. And I know that he, like I, will be proud of the fact that this is a Labour government that has produced a strategic defence review, a landmark shift in defence to make us more warfighting ready, that we have produced a defence industrial strategy that will make defence an engine for growth in this country, and a housing strategy that puts an end to the worst ever Tory privatisation and pumps £9 billion into a generational renewal of our forces military housing, which has already started. Mr. Speaker, this is a government, a Labour government, that is delivering for defence and is delivering for Britain.
Emma Lewell.
Much, Mr. Speaker. Allies rightly agreed that up to 1.5% of GDP would go towards measures for civil preparedness and resilience. But public support for our current commitments, let alone mobilisation in a crisis, does not meet government assumptions. Can my right honourable friend say how he plans to address this so we fully meet our Article 3 obligations?
So State.
Well, I can, Mr. Speaker, and my honourable friend who served not just now on the Defence Select Committee but in the previous Parliament will remember that in the last year of the last government, the total spending on defence was just under £54 billion. She will know that this year and next year it is set to be over £65 billion. She will see the increasing defence spending. She will recognise the importance of making that commitment, and she will recognise the value of the Strategic Defence Review in setting the vision for how our forces need to be transformed in order to be more ready to warfight and better able to deter.
Thomas.
Question number 4, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable member for his question. The Government is working exceptionally hard to ensure we speed up our procurement of uncrewed systems, and that's taking us to, in 2024 alone, buying up to 5,400 drones, moving up to 8,000 in 2026, and really importantly is the development of our Drone Uncrewed Centre of Excellence, which will be launched later on this year to provide better coordination and cooperation across defence, industries and academia in the delivery of uncrewed systems.
Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Britain's future security depends on developing, testing and, crucially, adopting uncrewed systems quickly and safely. But the regulation is immensely complex, expands many departments, the MOD, DFT, DCIT. The regulators include the MCA, CAA, MAA, Ofcom, Environment Agency. The list goes on and it's endless. But for military, police, agencies and for our innovators, the barriers are stifling. And he will know that I've worked with stakeholders to develop proposals for reform which he's seen. I know the MOD, as well as the Department for Transport and even the Treasury, are considering them. But to make real progress, we need coherence in this area. Will he help me now convene a meeting of all the key regulators, cross-department, to drive this forward?
Minister.
Again, the honourable member, his passion and support on this subject is not lost on me. The reality is the majority of casualties in the front line in Ukraine are caused by uncrewed systems. We have a navy without any ships that has destroyed a navy, and we have an air force with minimal amount of fighter jets delivering strikes deep within Russia. With the dedication of the UK Uncrewed Systems Centre opening later on this year, we're establishing a centralised body of expertise to cut across the regulation and align regulatory freedoms with defence, ensuring we can reduce that friction and improve assurance. I would love to meet with you, with the honourable member and the collective organisations to move this forward at pace. Enough is enough when it comes to regulation. We need to get on with it, and we're going to double down over the next 12 months.
Rebecca Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Turnchapel Wharf and the Catwater in my constituency host many innovative marine autonomous defence innovators. Yet the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency Workboat Code Edition 3 is hampering the testing, development and utilisation of autonomous vessels. They cannot get the licences to even be out on the water. So what conversations has the Minister had with his counterparts in the Department for Transport to stress the urgency of sorting this issue so that the promised defence investment for Plymouth actually gets out to sea?
Minister.
It's not lost to me that the testing and trialling of systems, both in the maritime and the airspace, is full of regulatory issues and hurdles. We've had a couple of meetings with the Department of Transport. We've got a firm grasp of the problem now. Now we need to move it forward and unlock legislation to ensure it's easier and far faster for those companies to develop cutting world technology and get it into the open market, but also procure it for defence.
Amanda Martin.
5, Mr. Speaker. With permission, Mr. Speaker, I should like to answer questions 5 and 23 together. Engaging and supporting the women who have served in our armed forces is an important part of our new veterans strategy and is a priority that is deeply personal to me as a veteran myself. As well as our commitments across the strategy, we will be specifically taking forward plans to establish a new Women Veterans Forum and an oral history project to improve public understanding and recognition of the experiences and contributions of women veterans in keeping the nation safe.
Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the honourable member for her service and for her support in this area. In the last 2 years, Mr. Speaker, changes have been made to the Royal Fleet Auxiliary maternity policy that prevents new parents from taking back-to-back shore assignments, crucial to balancing seafaring and young families. These changes are especially detrimental to families where both parents are in the RFA and raise serious concerns about compliance with the employment law. Given we have a retention crisis in the RFA, does she think the maternity policy provides adequate flexibility for families? And will the Minister meet with me and those affected to discuss this important issue?
Minister.
We are, of course, committed to supporting families across defence, and we recognise the extraordinary service that RFA sailors give to this country. As I have previously written to my honourable friend, the maternity and parental support package provided by the RFA does include enhanced leave entitlements and tailored assistance through mechanisms such as occupational health. While consecutive shore postings have never been a defence policy, the RFA does support employees to use flexibilities within that offer, and I would be happy to meet with the member to discuss further.
John Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I first thank everyone at Albemarle Barracks for hosting me recently and showing me the facility. The Royal British Legion Women's Network offers valuable support for the Armed Forces community, and it's vital that all members of that community and all relatives of that community can access it. Now, in rural areas such as in my constituency, where access to that support is often harder to reach, it's more important that government does all it can to support veterans who may be further from the centre. Can I ask, therefore, what the government is doing to ensure that veterans in rural areas, including female veterans, are able to receive the support they need? And can I invite the Minister to join me to visit Prado Veterans Breakfast Club at some point in 2026?
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for his question, and he raises a very important point. As he will be aware, we are rolling out the Valour programme, which does include a network of regional centres. As part of that, there will also be an online presence as well to help make sure we can expand the reach where possible. And of course, I will be delighted to come and visit.
Sarah Dyke.
Recent media reports highlight the full extent of abuse women have suffered in the armed forces, highlighting why the recommendations from the Atherton report are urgently implemented in full. So what steps is the Minister taking to remove the barriers to create an environment within our armed forces where women feel protected, valued and given the opportunity to excel and flourish?
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for raising an incredibly important point. As she will know, I'm very personally dedicated to improving the experiences of women in our armed forces, and she rightly highlights the Atherton report. There are several things that we are taking forward to tackle this programme, such as improving how we take care of victims and how we introduce more accountability. And I would also highlight our support to the cross-governmental violence against women and girls as well.
Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Katie has served in the RAF for 25 years. In preparation for her return to civilian life, she secured an MOD rentals tenancy to provide housing stability before she receives her pension next year and she can buy a house of her own. At short notice, that tenancy was withdrawn, leaving her and her family facing potential homelessness in clear violation of the Armed Forces Covenant. And despite repeated appeals and over 28 days of silence from the Ministry of Defence, no resolution has yet been offered. Will the Minister please review this case urgently and the letter I sent to Ministers on the 5th of December to ensure that female veterans like Katie are properly supported during their transition back to civilian life?
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for raising this case. If we will provide me with the details after, I will of course take a close look.
Liz Jarvis.
7, Mr. Speaker.
Who's ready for it? Anybody?
Sorry. With permission, Mr. Speaker, I should like to answer questions 7 and 13 together. A new transformational veteran strategy, the first in 7 years, which recognises veterans as a national asset. £50 million Valour funding to make it easier for veterans to access the care and support they deserve. £12 million for the Reducing Veterans Homelessness programmes, as well as Ops Fortitude, Courage, Restore, Ascend and Nova continuing their fantastic work. We will continue to deliver on what matters most for veterans.
Ms Jarvis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're incredibly proud of our veterans in Eastleigh, and Veterans Dementia Support UK, based in my constituency, do fantastic work assisting veterans. They want to expand their work by opening more support groups, but ex-service personnel who want to volunteer are struggling to get their DBS checks in a timely fashion. Will the Minister work with colleagues to ensure that veterans charities can continue to do their vital work by reducing the wait times for DBS checks to be processed?
Minister.
The honourable member makes a valid point, and I will of course look in to see what I can do. Thank you.
Jess Brentford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Liz was thrown out of the military for being gay and has since received redress for this injustice via the LGBT Financial Recognition Scheme. Liz told me that she has never attended any veteran support groups because her discharge from the military left her feeling unworthy of the title of veteran. So what steps is the department taking to encourage those veterans to engage with support schemes like the brilliant female veteran scheme running at Tuppenny Barn in Southbourne in my constituency to rebuild trust after the grave injustice that they experienced?
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for raising a really important point that those who were treated disgracefully by the former policy under the military may be struggling with being able to get back in touch. I can assure her that the Armed Forces family would welcome her back with open arms, and if she's happy to pass details on to me, we can provide several ways of doing that, for example via the Regimental Association, which will be only too happy to meet with her, I'm sure.
Steve Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the whole House will agree with me that one homeless veteran is one too many, So can the Minister outline how the landmark new veteran strategy will boost support to prevent any veteran falling into homelessness?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for raising such an incredibly important point. As he says, one veteran on the streets is one too many. The new Veterans Strategy reiterated our commitment, and we were pleased to announce an additional £12 million to vital homelessness services such as the Reducing Veteran Homelessness Programme. And I, of course, would remind everybody of Op Fortitude, which is the phone number that will help veterans access housing support when they need it.
Kim Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I met with Paul, Dougie and Ash at Tom Harrison House in my Liverpool Riverside constituency. It's the only facility in the country that offers support to veterans who have addictions. And I'd like to ask the Minister if she'll meet with me and the workers from the organisation to talk about statutory funding so that we can offer that support more widely so that more ex-veterans get the support that they need.
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for highlighting the incredibly important work that Tom Harrison House does, and I've heard many times of the unique nature of what they are able to provide. Of course, what we must be able to do is support how veterans can access that particular service and what we can do to further it. I'd be more than happy to come and visit.
Shadow Minister Mark Francois.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Regarding Northern Ireland veterans who previously served on Operation Banner, the government's NI Troubles Bill has now been powerfully described by 8 retired 4-star generals and 1 Air Chief Marshal as, in their words, a direct threat to national security. Can the Minister confirm in the House today that not all of their so-called 6 protections for our veterans are even actually in the bill, and that, moreover, at least half of them also apply to alleged paramilitaries as well?
As the Right Honourable Member well knows, we have been very clear about which protections will be in the bill. And I would just like to remind him that it is his legislation introduced while he was in government that gave blanket immunity to terrorists, and he has very proudly supported that.
Oh, Francois.
That's not true. We had hoped to hear from the wannabe future Prime Minister on this one, but as we haven't, nevertheless, if what the Minister claims is true, he's not denying it. How does she explain the recent comment by General Sir Peter Wall, a former head of the British Army, that the protections are, these are his words, a meaningless insult and only become relevant once reinvestigation is underway? Exactly. Respectfully, who knows more about defending our veterans? A brand new minister or a former chief of the General Staff who actually commanded them?
Minister.
Shameful. We will, of course, implement these new protections, and we have been in close dialogue with many, many different representatives. Again, to turn the question back onto him, his legislation failed utterly. It gave blanket immunity to terrorists, and I will not hear lectures from that side of the House who weren't able to provide a solution in 14 years.
Sarah Hall.
Question number 8, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I'd like to answer question 8, 18, 21 and 22 together. This government is putting NATO first, and we're stepping up on European security. In the past month alone, I've met with US, German and Estonian counterparts to discuss deepening our cooperation and protecting NATO's eastern flank. But it doesn't just stop there. This is about joint exercising. This is about joint industrial cooperation. And just in the last 12 to 18 months, we've done an amazing frigate deal with our Norwegian partners. We've done a deal for Typhoon with Turkey, and we're building our industrial and exercising cooperation across the whole of the NATO flank.
Sarah Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday I visited the Ukrainian Family Hub in Warrington for their Christmas celebrations. Many families who fled Putin's war of aggression have made Warrington their home, but they are deeply worried about what the future holds, what peace might look like, and whether they will ever be able to return safely to Ukraine. Can the Minister reassure them that the UK and our NATO allies remain steadfast in supporting Ukraine, both in defending its sovereignty and in shaping a just and lasting peace?
Minister.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for raising this important issue within the House. The pain of losing your home is not lost on me, and being apart from your friends and family over the Christmas period has a huge impact. Nearly 7 million Ukrainians have been displaced since 2022, all because of Putin's barbaric and illegal invasion. I want to be absolutely clear. Mr. Speaker, we will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes and are committed to working towards a just and lasting peace. That's why we're spending a record £4.5 billion on military support to Ukraine this year, and why our total committed military, humanitarian and economic spend now amounts to £21.8 billion.
Ben Goldsby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Norfolk has a proud and enduring history in the defence of our islands and our allies, from Nelson's legacy to the RAF bases that welcome NATO personnel to this very day. What assessment has the Minister made of how Norfolk's defence assets can further support our shared security with our NATO partners?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for this opportunity to acknowledge the vital military history work of Norfolk. We're defending the UK from Zeppelin raids in World War I to serving as a frontline bomber command in World War II. RAF Marsham has long been a cornerstone of our UK's air power. We're investing in RAF Marsham procuring at least or multiple F-35 jets, which will fly from the base. These will strengthen NATO's nuclear deterrent posture and have huge pass over to your constituency also, the honourable member's constituency.
Deterrence depends not only on military strength, but on our economic resilience too, from energy security to protecting our critical infrastructure and vital industries. Can the Minister provide some more information on what conversations he's been having with our partners in Europe, our NATO allies in Europe, to align our economic security measures with our broader defence strategy on our continent?
Minister.
I thank the honourable friend for his question. The reality is armies, navies and air forces respond to crisis. Economies, industries and societies win wars. We're stepping up on these key areas, but not alone. As a great general once said, there's only one thing worse than working with allies, and that's working without them. We are doing this together. We're working within NATO to integrate economic security, such as supply chain resilience, for critical sectors into collective defence planning. As part of the G7, we are strengthening investment, screening, export controls and the protection of critical national infrastructure.
Christopher Vince.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer. As the Minister will be aware, because I mention it quite often, Harlow is home to high-tech, innovative defence innovation, and also high-tech skilled jobs. Can the Minister confirm that one of the consequences of the historic NATO summit in June is that there will be further investment in defence and resilience that constituencies like mine of Harlow can really benefit from?
Minister.
I'd like to thank the honourable member for the question. The reality is this government isn't hollowing out defence. This government is not taking a dig at defence procurement. This government is increasing morale, it's increasing recruitment, and importantly, it's making defence an engine for growth. That's investing in SMEs all over the country on new cutting-edge technology, but also long-term technological capability that will be battle-winning in the long term.
Julian Lewis.
Has the Minister, having sat through the debate on Ukraine on 4th of December, taken on board the important message for our NATO colleagues that if there is a forced division of Ukraine, just as there was of occupied Germany at the end of the war, it will be essential that unoccupied Western Ukraine is fully manned with deterrent Allied troops, because nothing could be more destabilizing than a vacuum in Western Ukraine with a heavily militarized, occupied Eastern Ukraine under the control of the killer in the Kremlin.
Yeah. Minister.
I'd like to thank the honourable member for his insight and support to all things defence. The reality is we must ensure Ukraine is at the very centre of any negotiation. And this government has been leading not only just on the coalition of the willing, but also across the Ukrainian Defence Contact Group. And just recently, we've raised $50 billion in support of Ukraine. The reality is, if the Ukrainians negotiate a peace, the UK will be fully supporting that peace through multiple different vectors.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is a mismatch between the rhetoric that we are hearing and the funding for defence in this Parliament. The NATO Secretary-General talks about preparing for war on the scale our grandparents endured, while the US National Security Strategy states that it is a core interest of the United States to re-establish strategic stability with Russia. In that context, will the government urge a lowering of the temperature of statements by the likes of the Chief of Defence Staff and the First Sea Lord, or will the government increase defence spending closer to 3.5% of GDP in this Parliament?
Minister.
Let's be really clear. For 14 years, we have not seen defence spending going up. As the individuals sit on the other side of that polished bench and criticise the individual speaking here today, I'm the one that had to put up, collectively, with poor recruitment targets, terrible morale, poor equipment and capability. Yet, this government on this side of the House, for the first time in a generation, is increasing defence spending for a long time. Everybody in uniform will be able to look forward for the next 10 years and see that defence spending is going up. Well done.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Minister for Defence Readiness told me that there are no other platforms within the Army's armoured fleet which can fulfil the armoured reconnaissance role. Ajax has been specifically designed for this purpose. Our commitment to NATO includes 2 divisions. The first includes 3 manoeuvre brigades with armoured and mechanised capabilities. With Ajax undeployable, we have no formation reconnaissance capability and therefore no deployable armoured brigade, thus not currently meeting our NATO obligation. Could the Minister clarify whether we still meet his NATO test without Ajax, whether we meet our NATO obligations more broadly, and if he thinks we do, how?
Minister.
As the honourable member will recognise, there's a review underway into Ajax. But as we may point out, Ajax has been overspent. The key user requirements have changed and oscillated from left to right for the last 10 years. And now we've taken this on and recognised that we've got to secure the capability to provide our armed forces with the very best. The reality is, Ukraine is teaching us war is being fought very differently. It's not just about armour, it's about a mix of uncrewed systems, as the individual will well know, and armoured systems, not one over the other.
Susan Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We recently saw an individual recruited by the Russian government carry out an arson attack on British soil. This following on from the Yantar's aggressive action against our RAF in the North Sea. Does the Minister agree with me that to defend against the growing Russian threat, we need to coordinate with our European allies, not just in aiding Ukraine, but on domestic security measures as well, be it on land, on sea or in our digital spaces?
Minister.
The honourable member brings out an exceptionally valid point. Just last Thursday, we launched the Military Intelligence Services, which is primarily about coordinating all of our intelligence capabilities to ensure we can identify, deter and defeat threats should they be posed towards the UK, our critical national infrastructure or any of our sensitive sites. It's worth noting that the engagement between the Military Intelligence Services, our Defence Intelligence and, of course, all of our other agencies is absolutely hand in glove with our like-minded European allies fighting for democracy and freedom all over the world.
John Glenn.
Speaker number 10.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'd like to answer questions 10 and 19 together. The forthcoming Defence Investment Plan has been informed by a range of inputs and perspectives, including those of service chiefs. These contributions have been critical in delivering on this strategic defence review and enabling the transformation in defence that's necessary as we move towards warfighting readiness.
John Glenn.
Reply. As a former Chief Secretary, when I see reports that service chiefs are drafting letters to the Secretary of State warning about their concerns about enough money going into defence, can I ask the Minister that when the delayed Defence Investment Plan is produced, it will give clarity on when the government will reach that critical 3% threshold. To be credible, it needs to distinguish between the start of the next Parliament, 2020-29, and the end of it, 2034. If it doesn't, then no one's going to take the aspiration seriously.
Minister.
Can I thank him for his question? I know he has a strong views on defence, as do I. That is why, as a government, we are increasing defence spending, £5 billion extra in our budget, 2.5% by 2027, 3% in the next Parliament. The strategic defence review will be implemented by the Defence Investment Plan that will set out what capabilities we're buying and how can we improve our warfighting readiness. And he'll have to wait just a wee bit longer as the work continues in order to be able to deliver that dip very soon.
Secretary Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When Labour published the Strategic Defence Review, the independent authors wrote in the Telegraph that the commitment to spending 3% of GDP on defence was, and I quote, vital to establishing the affordability of that review. Now their own service chiefs are voicing their concern over funding. Is he really telling us that he has no idea in what year they will reach 3% and no plan for how even to get there?
Yeah. Minister.
Well, the Strategic Defence Review was written on the basis of reaching 3%, and that is a key part of how we're increasing defence spending. I appreciate he's got his set lines that he's been given by the party, but his was a government that cut defence spending. This Labour government is increasing defence spending.
Mr.
Speaker, this government's ambition for recovering the damage that the previous government did to our defence will be laid clear in the Defence Industrial Strategy, and we will Defence Investment Plan. The roadblock to our safe entry won't really change in reality, but what we will need to support this ambition are long-term financing vehicles that enable multilateral offers and help us get best value for public money so that we can protect this government from Russian aggression. Can the Minister provide us with any information about the work that he's doing with other government departments to ensure that such vehicles are brought about, such as the Defence, Security and Resilience Bank?
Minister.
Well, can I thank him for raising the importance of defence and security being a whole-of-government endeavour. It's not just the MOD. That is why we have a renewed and refreshed working relationship with the Treasury and the MOD working hand-in-hand to increase defence spending. The Defence Investment Advisory Group that will publish in the new year will look at new financing methods to bring in more investment into defence, just as we're working more closely with our colleagues across government to increase our warfighting readiness, improve skills, and make sure that defence can be an engine for growth in every nation and region of the country.
In the budget, defence received a capital expenditure of £25.9 billion. In comparison, health and social care got £14 billion and housing got £9.6 billion. Mr. Speaker, in the interest of democracy, I'm going to put forward a different viewpoint than we've heard so far, because it's a fact that UK citizens are dying because of inequality and poverty, not the threat of another nation launching a nuclear attack against us. Should this fact not be reflected in prioritising government expenditure?
Minister.
Can I say to my honourable friend that I disagree with him? If you look at the people dying in Ukraine, dying for Ukrainian freedom, dying for our freedom, from a Russian war machine, the threat is real. If you look at the activities of the Russian spy ship Yantar loitering over our critical underwater infrastructure, the threat is real. If you look at the cyber attacks on our defence infrastructure, the threat is real. Our entire economy is supported by our national security. That is why this government is investing in our national security, and we make no apologies for doing so.
David Reid, Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary General of NATO, our service chiefs and intelligence leaders have warned repeatedly about the growing risks of conflict with Russia. Yet the recent budget does not reflect that reality. In fact, the MOD are cutting £2.6 billion in year, and we've just discovered this week that they are cutting overseas training just to try and balance their books. So, Mr. Speaker, when the Minister speaks to service chiefs about the Defence Investment Plan, is he asking them to plan for credible deterrence, or simply to accept that there is no cash behind the government's rhetoric?
Minister.
What a load of nonsense. We're increasing defence spending, £5 billion extra in our budget this year. We're moving to 2.5% of GDP being spent on defence 3 years before anyone thought it was possible. The Defence Investment Plan will set out what we're investing in, and it will set out how we're moving towards warfighting readiness, implementing the Strategic Defence Review. If his government had put this investment in, we would not be sorting out the mess that we are today. But they didn't, and so we are.
Topic Sir Julian Smith.
Mr. Speaker, during 2025, this Labour government has been delivering for defence and delivering for Britain. The largest increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War, the largest level of military support for Ukraine, the largest pay increase for Forces personnel in 20 years, the largest investment in Forces housing for 50 years, the largest ever British warship deal, and the largest Typhoon deal for a generation. The Strategic Defence Review to move us to warfighting readiness, the Defence Industrial Strategy to drive defence as an engine for growth across the UK, new defence agreements with the EU, with Norway, with France, new investment in technology with Atlantic Bastion, Cyber EM Command and drones, and over 1,000 major new contracts signed. Mr. Speaker, in 2026 we will deliver further. And today, on the eve of Parliament's Christmas recess, I want to wish every member of our armed forces, especially those whose service will mean they are separate from their loved ones, I want to wish them, on behalf of the House, a peaceful and a safe Christmas.
Antonio Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Sorry, Judith Smith, it was that long, I've forgotten about it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with the Secretary of State's remarks about our armed forces and them having a fantastic Christmas wherever they are? The Strategic Defence Review talked about the need for a national conversation on defence. What steps is the government taking to support this, and particularly to face our constituents and the population with the trade-offs needed to increase spending on our armed forces?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I refer the right honourable gentleman to the speech tonight of the Chief of the Defence Staff, in which he will argue that the price of peace is rising, and he will set out exactly how this requires a response from the whole of society, not just a strengthening of our armed forces.
Antonio Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The West Midlands is a key engine of the UK's manufacturing base. What work is the Minister doing with our West Midlands Mayor to ensure that West Midlands companies, especially our SMEs, benefit from our increased defence spending and our defence industrial strategy?
Can I thank you for a question? I've met with Richard Parker. I've seen the passion and determination he has for driving more growth in his small businesses that are located in the West Midlands. I think there's a huge opportunity as we increase defence spending, and standing up the new Office of Small Business Growth in the new year will provide more opportunities for West Midlands businesses to access defence contracts.
So, Secretary of State James Cotledge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Secretary of State said from that dispatch box in May that the UK-EU Defence Pact would, and I quote, open the door to the €150 billion EU Defence Fund. From this dispatch box in June, I warned that he was actually doing was surrendering our precious sovereign fishing grounds without getting a penny in return. Who was right?
You opened the nets.
So, State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we were talking about the Strategic Defence Partnership Agreement. We wanted to follow it up with an agreement on SAFE. That proved impossible to negotiate in a way that was good value for the British defence industry, good value for the British taxpayer. That will not stop us promoting the cause of the British defence industry and doing the record defence export deals that we've done in this last year. An extra £10 billion in the biggest ever warship deal with Norway, £8 billion for the new biggest Typhoon deal in a generation. And, Mr. Speaker, we will do more alongside the European Union, which is a valued partner, particularly on Ukraine, as we stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes.
Here with questions a long time at this rate, Alan Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I was proud to meet Filtronic, a leading satellite communications business in Net Park, part of a growing space cluster. How will ministers from MOD and DCIT work together to really champion our innovative space industry?
Minister.
As the space nerd in the ministerial team, can I welcome his interest in space? Working with Minister Lloyd in the Department for Science, Industry and Technology, we've got a real opportunity to renew a space strategy because the space strategy we inherited was out of date, ineffective and wasn't supporting our industry. We're seeking to support our industry to go further. I'm happy meeting him and other colleagues to discuss space further.
James McCleary, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Mr. Speaker, in light of the United States' new national security strategy, which fundamentally alters US national global defence positioning, does the Secretary of State accept that relying on US-owned nuclear weapons for the recently announced new F-35A jets compromises British operational security, given that the UK would require explicit US authorisation to use them, and given the Public Accounts Committee's concern that the Ministry of Defence does not know the full cost of the F-35A programme, effectively a blank cheque? How can this represent value for money if the United States could deny UK use of this capability in a crisis, and will the government publish its assessment of this risk?
So stay.
No, I fundamentally disagree with the honourable gentleman. The Strategic Defence Review in June recommended that Britain considered becoming part of the DCA nuclear mission of NATO. Within weeks, that's exactly what we committed to do, and we will go ahead now and purchase the F-35As in order that Britain can play a full part in that DCA nuclear mission of NATO, reinforcing our European defence, reinforcing our nuclear deterrence.
Pam Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colchester is home to many serving personnel, veterans and their families. Can the Minister set out how our new veteran strategy, Valour, will better support those who have served in our armed forces in my area and beyond? And will a member of the ministerial team love to visit Colchester in the year that we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the airborne forces being based there?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her question. As she rightly notes, the veteran strategy is a huge step forward in how we will support our veterans. The £50 million Valour commitment will rapidly improve how we are able to meet our veterans' needs, and I will of course visit her constituency, although probably not on the same day as Liverpool.
Mark Plitchard.
The Defence Secretary says this country should get onto a war footing, but the UK currently has no comprehensive anti-hypersonic missile or anti-ballistic missile defence system in place. And given the threats from Russia and elsewhere and their capabilities, it does mean the UK right now, whether we vote Labour or Conservative, all of our constituents are defenceless, and this country, quite frankly, is a sitting duck.
Well, the right honourable gentleman will recognise that in the Strategic Defence Review it pointed out that we must do more to take seriously our homeland defence, and we are. It pointed out that we needed to do more in our integrated air and missile defence for the UK, and we are, and we will.
Irene Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Until the 1980s, my constituency of North Ayrshire and Arran was home to one of the world's largest explosives factories in Ardere, Stevenston, in its heyday providing employment for around 15,000 people. I welcome that Ayrshire has been identified as one of the 13 potential sites across the UK for new munitions and energetics factories, and we would very much welcome another opportunity to support defence, either by expanding the munitions site at Beith or welcoming a new facility. Can the Secretary of State confirm when the outcome of the successful sites will be announced?
Minister.
I thank one more friend for her interest in this. We are moving towards an always-on munitions strategy, and we've allocated £1.5 billion to create 6 new energetics munitions factories. The first of those will be starting construction next year. Very happy meeting her to discuss the potential options in Scotland further.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given Germany have lifted their partial arms embargo to Israel, why does the UK government persist with restrictions on defence export licences to our ally?
So stay.
Because we have in place the restrictions on export licences for any components that could be used for the risk of breaching international humanitarian law in Gaza.
James Frith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the government's commitment to supporting servicemen and women to travel home for Christmas, including those from Bury North. Given Bury's long and proud military tradition and our ambition to host a Valour Centre, could the Minister set out what practical steps the government is taking this Christmas to support armed forces personnel and their families, and how that commitment will translate into stronger long-term local support for veterans? And will they join me in wishing our brave men and women a very happy Christmas?
Yeah. Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and I would like to thank him as well for the tireless campaigning he does on behalf of our armed forces. And I'm very proud to be part of a ministerial team that is ensuring that over 35,000 junior personnel who don't currently qualify for travel support will get their trip home over the Christmas period paid for. This is part of the government delivering on our commitment to our armed forces and renewing the contract with those who serve.
Bradley Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, the head of MI6 will say that the front line is everywhere. Doesn't this mean that the entirety of the government and the military needs to be far more proactive in dealing with threats that we face now and to accelerate defence spending in excess of 3% of GDP before the end of the decade?
Minister.
And that's exactly why we launched the Military Intelligence Service on Thursday, to map and track those threats, deter them, and if necessarily, defeat them.
Jonathan Hinder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's deal to build 20 new Typhoons for NATO member Turkey is welcome news for jobs in Lancashire, including for my constituents in Pendle and Clitheroe working at the BAE Samlesbury site. But in this geopolitical environment, I'm sure the Minister will agree with me that we need sovereign capability more than ever. So can he give us some more good news, back British workers and put a domestic order in for Typhoons?
Minister.
Having seen the workers both in Samlesbury and also in Wharton and the expert work they do, they were a key part of why Turkey opted for the Typhoon contract, helping secure more work, not just in those two plants, but in the nationwide supply chain. All defence spending decisions are made in the dip, but we're continuing to promote the Typhoon as an export product, which I hope will provide further work for our brilliant UK workforce in the future.
So Desmond Swain.
As we've come away empty-handed from the European Security Action Instrument, can we have the fish back?
As a shadow fisheries minister, when the botched Brexit deal went through, I know that much of the extra fish is paper fish. It's not able to be caught. The new restrictions that were put in place on our fishermen means it doesn't work. But this department is focusing on improving our defences, increasing defence spending, something he never did when he was in government.
I think the Minister doesn't need to be netted. Martin Rhodes.
Speaker, many LGBT veterans, including those in my constituency, were seriously affected by the indignity they faced during the pre-2000 ban on LGBT personnel. What progress has his department made in delivering the financial reparations to LGBT veterans affected by that ban?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm disgusted by the mistreatment of our brave LGBT veterans who served between 1967 and 2000, and I'm pleased that the government has now delivered 48 of the 49 recommendations made in Lord Etherton's independent review. One of these was the unveiling of the LGBT plus Armed Forces Community Memorial, which I was very deeply honoured to be able to attend alongside LGBT veterans and service personnel. The one outstanding recommendation recognises the unique experiences of female veterans, and work is ongoing on a number of initiatives towards this, including the launch of a new Women's Veterans Forum.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Procurement Minister said that we would have the Defence Investment Plan in the autumn. The Secretary of State has now told us that they're working flat out to get it to us by the end of the year. When I was in the Army, we had a saying that 2 minutes early is 3 minutes late, Mr. Speaker. So can we just make sure that this lackadaisical approach to punctuality has not spread to the military? And can the Secretary of State confirm that the King's birthday parade will indeed take place at 11 a.m. on the 13th of June?
So is it.
Mr. Speaker, and indeed, and a happy Christmas to the honourable gentleman and the whole House.
I swear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The recent Typhoon deal is welcome news in my constituency of Blackpool South, an area in the country that has the most deprivation that we see, but also the demand for jobs and apprentices. But can the Minister outline what more will be done? Could there be a domestic order, and what other deals we're looking at internationally to create more jobs and apprentices that we need on the Foul Coast?
Well, can I thank him for his constant championing of the workforce at BAE Systems and the supply chain? Absolutely vital. I've seen the new apprentices, the energy enthusiasm. We're working with colleagues across government to look at what further export orders are available and can be secured, so we can expand the sales internationally of the Typhoon fighter aircraft, securing not only our security, jobs in the UK, but our nationwide, our NATO ally security as well.
Dave Dugan.
nation is harmed by a default American first posture, ironically, especially apparent in the so-called independent nuclear deterrent, which relies on US tech for fusing, firing, arming, neutron initiators, the gas transfer system and the Mark IV aero shell. Add to this the purchase of further F-35s for US manufactured gravity-delivered nuclear weapons, and it seems very difficult to understand why, although President Trump will put America first, this Labour government also seems keen to do the same, while spurning the innovation opportunity of the £130 billion SAFE programme in the EU.
Minister.
Rising defence spending in Scotland, more jobs in Scotland, and just moans from the SNP. No new jobs. We're investing more in British defence firms, more in Scottish defence firms, a new Scotland defence growth deal, and more opportunities on the Clyde and Rosyth and elsewhere around Scotland. It should be welcomed, but I'm afraid the Christmas spirit has yet to arrive on the SNP benches.
Jane Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this year, I welcomed the Royal Assent to the bill creating an Armed Forces Commissioner. Currently, there's no such equivalent for the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. Will the Minister confirm the plan to introduce an Armed Forces Commissioner for the RFA in the Armed Forces Bill next year, as set out in my 10-minute rule bill? And will he give a report on progress of the RFA pay negotiations and collective bargaining agreement?
Mr. Speaker, I welcome our honourable friend's 10-minute rule bill. I'd like to meet with her to look seriously at this. She's quite right that this country has never had something like the Armed Forces Commissioner. This will be a new independent voice in statute, reporting direct to Parliament, not to ministers, an important way of giving voice to those in our armed forces who serve and the families who support them.
Dr. Danny Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Army Training Regiment in Winchester puts about 20% of new recruits through basic training, and it's due to be shut next July. But the replacement facilities in Purbeck aren't due to open until 2030 at the earliest, although apparently that is possibly going to be delayed. We have corresponded on this briefly, but would the Minister be willing to meet with me to explain how we are going, and maybe facilitate a meeting with the commanding officers of Winchester and Purbeck to ensure they have the support they need to increase troop numbers and not lose the capacity to train 20% of them?
Minister.
I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for the question. I'd love to sit down personally and talk through this issue in particular. It's worth noting, for the first time in a long time, we have more people joining than we do leaving. But a discussion would be really useful to talk through the specifics of that issue.
Amanda Hack.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Minister's response on the LGBT redress scheme. However, my constituents have shared their difficulties in getting evidence of mistreatment from the Ministry of Defence. Can the Minister set out any further actions they can take around making sure this evidence is easy for our veterans to access?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her question. As she rightly notes, historic treatment of LGBT veterans is a moral stain on our nation. There are a number of measures that we are taking forward to redress this, and I'd be more than happy to meet with her to discuss further.
Jim Allister.
Northern Ireland, alas, still remains under much of the EU law, including the EU's ODS legislation. It seems that from the 1st of January, the MOD fleet of Dakotas, Chinooks, Wildcats, Shadows and C-17 Globemasters and others may be unable to operate in Northern Ireland because their onboard fire extinguishers use halon, which will be banned in the EU from the 1st of January. What steps have been taken to deal with this ridiculous situation?
Minister.
We have taken steps, and I'm not worried about their ability to carry on operating, but I'm happy speaking to him further about that to give him reassurance.
Law.
Given we've recently had further estimates putting the total cost of the war in Ukraine to the European economy of north of $1 billion a year, and the total Allied commitment to Ukraine remains just around $100 billion a year, does the Secretary of State agree with me that we cannot but afford to go further in our support of our Ukrainian allies?
I do indeed, Mr. Speaker, and that's why I am convening and will co-chair tomorrow the latest meeting of the 50-nation-strong Ukraine Defence Contact Group. We will be looking to step up the support we're able to give Ukraine now to keep Ukraine in the fight, alongside the work we're doing in the Coalition of the Willing, so that we're ready to help secure the peace in the event of an agreement.
Mr Speaker, the Robert Jones and Agnes Hunt Hospital in my constituency is home to a world-class veterans centre, providing not only excellent orthopaedic care, but also wraparound support to help veterans carry on their life in civilian society. Will the Minister come to North Shropshire and meet the people who run the Veterans Centre so that she can see for herself how effective this model is?
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for highlighting the important work that is being undertaken, and of course I will come and visit in due course.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. One of the many challenges that Ukraine will face should a peace agreement be reached is the task of clearing land of mines and unexploded ordnance so that it can once again sustain Ukraine's vital agricultural economy. Can my right honourable friend set out how the government intends to invest in innovative demining technologies and work with Ukraine to ensure its land is made safe and productive for the future?
Minister.
The devastation caused by the illegal war, Putin's illegal war in Ukraine, is not lost on any of us. Millions of landmines, anti-tank mines have been laid all across the front line and will take decades to clear. We will work constructively with our Ukrainian and international allies to ensure that Ukraine is returned to normal as soon as peace is declared.
Tim Farrell.
The maintenance of our nuclear deterrent and the development of our wider defence capabilities in the United Kingdom rests very heavily upon the town of Barrow, next to my own constituency in my own district of Westmoreland and Furness. Will the Secretary of State recognise that investment into that town from the Council is crucial to maintaining our peace and our security? Will he therefore have a word with his colleagues in Cabinet, because the local council is set to have a 13% cut in its budget, which will put at risk much of the investment in the town of Barrow that is meant to underpin the defence of our realm.
Maybe I'll rephrase that. Secretary of State.
The right honourable gentleman's entirely right, and Barrow, since the general election, has seen more than 1,000 extra jobs in the shipyard alone. It will have seen the long-term commitment that this government has made to Team Barrow, which is the combination of national and local government and other agencies working together, and we're determined to make that a success.
Ewan Steinbeck.
Our Armed Forces Day is crucial to mark the bravery of our Armed Forces personnel and bring our communities together. Will the Minister meet me to discuss how we can better support Armed Forces Day events in 2026 in places such as Falkirk?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for raising this point, and he has been a tireless campaigner for the armed forces, and I will of course meet with him to discuss what we can do to support him.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Talis and Spirit in Northern Ireland are leading the way on cybersecurity and engineering. What steps have been taken to fund a potential Typhoon supply chain programme where Northern Ireland can play their part in contributing to aircraft production across the United Kingdom? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you for that question. We're working with the Northern Ireland Executive on the Northern Ireland Growth Deal, one of the 5 growth deals that will share £250 million to look at skills and how we can attract more inward investment. Be very happy when that concludes to give a briefing to him and other Northern Ireland colleagues on the progress that we're making.
Sir Julian Lewis.
I welcome the government's commitment ultimately to spend 5% on defence, as we used to do in the Cold War years of the 1980s, but not the target date of 2035. Does the government really believe that there is no threat of attack from Russia on a NATO country for the next 10 years?
Of course, there are rising threats, which is why we've got a rising defence budget over the next 10 years, and that 2035 commitment is one that we have made, shared with all other 31 NATO nations together.
Because the SDR states that it needs a 30% increase in cadet forces from 140,000 to 180,000. However, I am informed that there's a severe shortage of adult instructors. What is the Minister going to do to address that problem?
Minister.
The honourable member raises an important point. The cadets are a fantastic opportunity for our young people where they learn valuable skills, values and experience. Underpinning that is the work of our amazing adult volunteers. We're working very hard to see what we can do to improve how we support adult volunteers and of course recruit more so we can continue to grow our cadets, as we said, by 30% by 2030.
Right, we'll let the front bench change over. We now come to the urgent question. Show Secretary of State Stuart Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Secretary of State if he'll make a statement to the House on winter preparedness in the NHS.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The NHS National Medical Director says, and I quote, "This unprecedented wave of superflu is leaving the NHS facing a worst-case scenario." This is backed up by the data. On any given day last week, an average of 2,500 patients were in hospital beds, a 55% increase on the week before and almost double the numbers from 2023. 106 flu patients are in intensive care compared to 69 the previous week. There are 1,300 more staff off than the week before, and the number of calls received by NHS 111 last week was 446,000, 8% higher than this time last year. It is clear from both the NHS and UKHSA data that there is a real risk for the NHS and for patients. And it is at this moment of maximum danger that the BMA has chosen to go ahead with Christmas strikes when it will inflict the greatest level of damage on the NHS. The BMA said this dispute was about pay, but we gave them a 28.9% pay rise. Then they said it was also about jobs, so I offered a deal to halve the competition for jobs to less than 2 applicants per post. It is now clear what these strikes are really about. The BMA's fantasy demand for another 26% pay rise on top of the 28.9% they have already received. I also offered to extend the BMA's strike mandate so they could postpone this action and go ahead once flu has subsided. The fact they also rejected that offer shows a shocking disregard for patient safety. Since this strike represents a different magnitude of risk to previous industrial action, I am appealing to ordinary resident doctors to ignore the BMA strike and go to work this week. Abandoning patients in their hour of greatest need goes against everything a career in medicine is meant to be about. The entire focus of my department and the NHS team is now on getting the health service through the double whammy of flu and strikes. We've already vaccinated 17 million people, 170,000 more than last year, and 60,000 more NHS staff. We've invested in 500 new ambulances, 40 new same-day emergency care and urgent treatment centres, and 15 mental health crisis assessment centres. The NHS will also be recalling resident doctors to work in emergency situations, and we will not tolerate the dangerous attempts to block these requests that we've seen from the BMA in the past. I'm proud of the way the NHS team has pulled together through strike action in the past, and I know they will move heaven and earth to keep patients as safe as they can this winter. I'm just appalled that they are having to do so without the support of their colleagues in the BMA.
Stuart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This winter, a serious flu wave and rising RSV infections are pushing the NHS to its limits. Flu admissions, as we heard, are up 55% in a week. RSV cases are rising, especially in older people. But the government failed to prepare, as we pointed out earlier in the year. In July, the Health Secretary accepted JCVI advice to expand the RSV vaccine to over 80s. That expansion seems to have been quietly dropped. Flu vaccine uptake remains dangerously low, with fewer than 30% of some key groups vaccinated. Most worryingly, this does include NHS staff, who are going off sick because of flu, adding to staffing pressures. Delayed discharges are worsening. 19,000 beds, more bed days have been lost this year. Still, there is no winter discharge plan, no new funding, and no clarity. And today, yes, resident doctors confirmed further strike action next week that will add pressure to a system already under significant strain. And that is why we would ban strike action. But at the same time, this government is literally making it easier for unions through their employment rights bill. When the NHS is under this level of pressure, families deserve the reassurance that care will be there when they need it. So I ask the Secretary of State, will he now publish the government's plan for managing winter pressures, including delayed discharges and emergency care? And given he is worried about a double whammy of rising flu cases and a strike, what extra resources is he providing? And if he isn't, where is the money coming from? What action will he take to ensure RSV vaccine access for older people? And what will he do to raise flu vaccine uptake in vulnerable groups and in particular in NHS staff? Mr. Speaker, families are frightened. Some are already grieving. This crisis was not inevitable, but the government's failure to prepare has made it much worse.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will ignore the political nonsense about banning strikes and clamping down on trade unions. I will, however, take on directly the charge that we haven't prepared for this winter. We've delivered over 17 million flu vaccinations this session, hundreds of thousands more than this time last year, and 60,000 more NHS staff than last year are also getting their jab. We are on track to deliver the 5 percentage point increase in flu vaccine uptake in healthcare workers as set out in our urgent and emergency care plan. On children and young people, 500,000 2 to 3 year olds have been vaccinated, same as last year. 3.6 million school-aged children have been vaccinated, up 100,000 on last year, and we'll be going back to schools to do repeat visits in those areas where uptake within schools has not been as high as we would like. For care home residents, flu vaccination uptake is 71%. We're on track to meet the RSV uptake target for 25-26 in the published urgent and emergency care plan. So we are doing a lot on the vaccination front to prepare. In fact, on winter planning more generally, we started earlier and did more than ever to prepare for this winter. We had stress-tested winter plans, trust by trust. Local NHS leaders ran scenario-based exercises, including managing surges in demand and responding to virus outbreaks to test and strengthen their winter readiness plans, which are now being put into action. We've strengthened access by boosting GP access to keep people well and out of hospital. Through advertising campaigns, new online access routes and more GP practices open for longer hours over the Christmas period, we're making sure more people can be seen close to home, which matters because when people can get help early from their GP, they're less likely to end up in A&E. And of course, we're going further to improve our urgent and emergency care performance this winter. That's set out in our urgent and emergency care plan. We're investing almost £450 million into UEC this winter, meaning 500 new ambulances on the roads, expanding same-day and urgent treatment centres, providing targeted support to the most challenged trusts, creating capacity and keeping flow moving by sharing weekly data with trusts, encouraging the use of alternative community services, streamlining in-hospital discharge processes to get patients discharged more quickly from hospital when safe to do so, including joining up the NHS and social care, where relationships between health and social care have been improving year on year. And if I think about where we are this year compared to last year, there has been sustained improvement. So a lot done, more to do. Of course, our job is made harder by strike action. That's why this government is doing everything we possibly can to get the NHS through this winter. I just wish we were doing it with the BMA rather than against the BMA.
Dr. Rosanna Allen-Khan.
Mr. Speaker, if I may, I'd like to pay tribute to all the incredible staff at St George's in Tooting, where I did my A&E shifts with them this week, together in the trenches. The Labour government inherited an NHS that was bursting at the seams. And with flu cases on the rise, the NHS feels as though it's working with one arm tied behind its back. Over 500,000 people this year were treated in corridors in A&E. This is unsafe and undignified. The APPG on emergency care, which I have the privilege of actually chairing and working very closely with the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, published a report outlining our recommendations to end so-called corridor care. I know this is a matter of which the Secretary of State cares deeply, and I am asking him if he will meet with us to discuss some of the recommendations to provide safer, more dignified care for patients and staff.
Secretary of State.
Can I thank my honourable friend for her question? Can I echo her thanks to frontline NHS staff for what they're doing against a very challenging backdrop, which will be made all the more difficult this coming week? And can I thank her personally for her ongoing frontline service, which she performs in addition to her duties in this House? Of course, I'm always delighted to meet my honourable friend, and I'll be very happy to discuss her report with her.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Helen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. It's obvious already that this year is going to be very difficult for the NHS, with many A&E departments already overwhelmed, hospital wards full and too many patients looking at spending their Christmas on a corridor. Indeed, corridor care has been common throughout this year, and even trusts that have seen improvement in other areas, like Shrewsbury and Telford in my constituency, are struggling to make real progress in urgent and emergency care. In July this year, 1 in 5 people arriving at an A&E in Shropshire had to wait more than 12 hours, and that was before the double whammy of a record winter flu epidemic and an irresponsible doctors' strike. So, will the Prime Minister chair regular COBRA meetings to address this emergency? And will the Minister agree to make flu vaccines available to far more people and roll out an emergency vaccination scheme in communities to reach people who've been missed? And finally, will the Government support Liberal Democrat calls for a dedicated winter crisis unit, providing the locum doctors and social care support needed to discharge patients and free up hospital beds?
We are doing much of what the Liberal Democrat spokesperson asked. She's absolutely right. We need to focus on delayed discharge, on demand management, and the system is doing all of those things. It is challenging in the NHS, and the House will know of our determination to end corridor care. And we've certainly ended the nomenclature of temporary escalation spaces that makes corridor care sound like it is both normal and acceptable in the NHS, neither of which is true. I will stop short of asking the Prime Minister to chair COBRA meetings. That would not be the right mechanism or response. But of course, the Prime Minister and I meet regularly to discuss winter pressures, and I'll keep him apprised of the situation.
Alice McIntyre.
Secretary of State for his statement this afternoon. Residents in Gloucester are rightly worried about the rising flu levels. I myself got struck down by it a few weeks ago and can attest to how tough this current strain is. And does Secretary of State agree with me in that context that it's reckless for the BMA to be taking its members out on strike? And will he call for resident doctors in Gloucester to go to work next week to keep their patients safe?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, it's one thing for the BMA to have rejected the offer that we made to them. It's quite something else for them to have done that following a 28.9% pay rise. But we are where we are. The thing that I find utterly inexplicable and indefensible about the BMA's position is that we offered them the chance to extend their strike mandate to the beginning of February in order that strikes could be delayed into January to give the NHS a clear run at what is an extremely difficult and challenging winter and the most challenging time of the year for the NHS. The only reason the BMA are choosing to strike this week is because they have chosen a week where they know it will inflict maximum damage on the NHS, but in doing so risk avoidable harm to patients. It is that I think is completely unconscionable and indefensible and unnecessary. And I'd ask ordinary members of the BMA, whatever their views on the offer or this government, to bear that in mind when deciding whether or not to leave their patients this week.
Stephen Bott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the pressures from flu and strikes, can the Secretary of State confirm whether the evidence he gave to the pay review body remains correct, that any pay rises must be funded from within his department? And if so, given that the OBR said that inflation next year will be 3.5% and he offered 2.5% across the NHS and said a 1% increase would cost £1.5 billion, is he intending to give NHS staff a real terms pay cut or to take £1.5 billion from headline government commitments?
Oh, it's like the ghost of Christmas past has come to visit as one of my predecessors, as here to remind the BMA of what they used to have to deal with, and maybe they might be a bit more content with the ghost of Christmas present. And that's before we get threatened by the ghost of Christmas future somewhere up there. Let me take the point seriously, because he is a serious, he does ask a serious question. I'm only being slightly tongue-in-cheek. There's a serious point here, which is we put evidence into the pay review body process. They will make their recommendation, which we will consider at the time. We are in active discussions with Agenda for Change unions about whether we can find an agreement on future years, including exploring the prospect of a multi-year offer. I have made the same approach to all health unions, including the BMA, including the resident doctors. The challenge with resident doctors is their expectations are some way apart from affordability. And they are asking for a 24% pay rise on top of the 28.9% they've already had. That's not acceptable. And as his question implies, I have a responsibility for the entire NHS workforce, particularly the Agenda for Change staff, who have not done as well as doctors. And I see that as both a practical issue for me to address, but also a moral one too.
Danny Beales.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And first, I'd like to strongly associate myself with the Secretary of State's comments about the regrettable decision of the BMA and its members today. Turning to the pressures of flu and RSV, in light of the pressures that we currently face, does the Secretary of State think it's time to ask the JCVI to look again at its recommendations around the ages that these two vaccines are available, and specifically on RSV in infants? Does he think it's time to ask NHS England to look again at the decision to switch from an infant-based delivery model to a maternal-based delivery model on cost, but it has not taken into account the lower uptake now of RSV in infants? Thank you.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his support and for his questions. We will indeed, after this winter, reflect on our performance, just as we did last winter. He raised some interesting points about the way in which we deliver vaccines. As for the questions of eligibility and timing, we do rely on the expert advice of JCVI. They will also be looking at the data and looking at how this winter's panned out, and we'll look forward to receiving their recommendations in due course.
Joe Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State says that these strikes come at a time of maximum danger for the NHS and has called on the junior doctors to call off those strikes. I agree with him. But will he accept at least some responsibility for the second round of strikes under his watch? Because last year he conceded to a bumper pay deal to the same junior doctors with no strings attached. It's hardly surprising they judge him a soft touch on pay and have come back for more this year.
Mr. Speaker, I think the BMA are finding, regardless of their result today, that I'm not a soft touch. We will not be conceding to a completely unreasonable and unaffordable demands. The reason why we made that pay award within weeks of coming into government is we didn't think that their treatment at the hands of our predecessors had been fair. We recognise the issues they were raising on pay. Indeed, the irony of this round of strikes and previous rounds of strikes under this government is that I've recognised that whether on pay, on jobs, on working conditions, resident doctors make a whole series of fair and reasonable points, and we are doing our best to address those. And I think 28.9% pay is a meaningful step in the right direction on pay. I think our offer of emergency legislation, unusual in this House, would make a real difference, reducing competition for jobs from 4 to 1 to 2 to 1, less than 2 to 1. But they've rejected that course of action. In the end, I think people will judge the BMA's actions to be unreasonable. And of course, the issues they raise are serious ones, are substantial ones, but we see similar issues raised not just across the NHS but across the entire public sector. We can't fix everything for everyone everywhere all at once. I think most reasonable people accept that. For reasons I cannot understand, the BMA do not.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State is rightly proud of the work that has been done to vaccinate people, and he will be acutely aware that we are heading into the super spreader festive season. There are parents across the country who want to protect their parents by getting their children vaccinated. But right now there is a gap in the system when it comes to 16 and 17-year-olds who are not covered. That means unless you go to a wholly private provider, even if you pay, you cannot get a vaccine for this cohort. And NHS pharmacists are turning away parents who want to pay for a vaccine. Can I press the Secretary of State to correct that gap so that those families who want to protect their loved ones can do so, and that those 16 and 17-year-olds don't give their grandparents the worst Christmas present ever?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for a question. We will obviously review eligibility, distribution and means of people accessing the vaccine in the usual way. People should enjoy themselves over the Christmas period. It is a time for family. It is a time for seeing loved ones and friends, but just be mindful of the risk posed by particularly the most virulent strain of flu, and recognise that maybe just waiting an extra week if you're symptomatic and likely to give someone you love something they'd rather not have this Christmas, maybe just hold off for a week until you've recovered.
Andrew George.
Mr. Speaker, I strongly endorse the Secretary of State's emphasis on the importance of vaccination, not least to protect the resilience of frontline NHS staff and to face down the anti-vax and the vaccine hesitant. But nevertheless, would the Secretary of State reflect carefully on his emphasis on the shift from hospital to community at this time, given that the emergency departments are still in crisis and corridor care is still a norm across much of the country?
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman. He gives me the opportunity to just say, for the avoidance of doubt, accident and emergency is for accidents and emergency situations. It's not an anything and everything walk-in service, and A&E departments are already stretched ahead of strikes. If patients are in need of medical care or attention and struggling to access maybe their GP or wonder which NHS service local to them would be most suitable, NHS 111 provides a suitable service to triage and point people in the right direction. Of course, if someone requires an ambulance, dial 999 in emergencies. And if it is an accident or an emergency, people should attend emergency departments in the usual way.
Justin Madders.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Late on Friday, I received notification that the Eastern Walk-in Centre was going to be temporarily closed for a period of 4 weeks. Now, it appears that this is a move in response to the real pressures that are being faced in the NHS now, as I think most of the staff are going to be redeployed to the local A&E. But given myself and my honourable friend, the member for Birkenhead, campaigned vigorously previously to keep this centre open permanently, I'd be grateful for any assurances the Secretary of State can give that this step is indeed a temporary one and is indeed indicative of the real pressures the NHS is facing currently.
My honourable friend can rest assured that you have my support as he keeps his eye on the temporary nature of this closure, and I share his desire for it to be temporary. I would just make this point too. There is a view amongst some in the BMA that somehow these strikes are consequence-free for patients on the basis that, and for the NHS on the basis that we can just cancel some operations and it's okay because consultants will be covering. Well, I think that's quite a cavalier attitude to take to your fellow frontline staff who will be having their annual leave cancelled and finding themselves recalled right now. I also think it really minimises how patients feel, either when they can't access a walk-in service like my honourable friends, or indeed if you've waited, and often waited far too long, for a diagnostic test or scan, or for an operation, you've psyched yourself up, you're ready for that appointment, and then you find it's cancelled because of strikes. The BMA might try and kid everyone else that these are consequence-free for patients, but they really oughtn't kid themselves.
Dr. Andrew Murray.
Will the Health Secretary ensure we have clarity on advice regarding the use of face masks, particularly where they are mandated? He will be aware that there is conflicting advice being issued by various agencies which confuses people and reduces their confidence. And will he ensure that advice is absolutely rigorously evidence-based?
The honourable gentleman is absolutely right to call for an evidence-based approach, and that's why the government is not mandating mask use across the NHS or social care. What we do is support leaders in providers to make their own judgments based on the situations in their trust as to whether or not wearing of masks by patients and visitors is necessary given the pressures that they are under. Even in those cases, there is an understanding that people may not wish to comply, but I hope that people, if asked to, would.
Billington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my honourable friend share my concern that in this run-up to Christmas, we've now got a situation where NHS staff will be having to change their own Christmas plans in order to be able to cover emergency shifts as a result of this ridiculous strike, and patients will have emergency operations and indeed scheduled operations cancelled.
My honourable friend is absolutely right to raise the issue of disruption. And look, the thing I'm really worried about as we look towards the end of this week, we've got very carefully laid plans to manage industrial action this week. But it's also the long tail that takes us into next week, the following week and into the new year, for a few reasons. One is, in our experience, there is always a need to recover the service following that kind of disruption. And sometimes the worst disruption, ironically, is seen in the weeks that follow, not just during strike days. And secondly, this is normally the busiest time of the year. And we normally get through the busiest time of the year because we have experienced consultants who are willing to put in extra shifts over the Christmas and New Year period, recognising those pressures. Those same people are now going to be absolutely knackered because of the toil of covering for their resident doctor colleagues over the 5-year period. I really do think that in choosing the timing of these strikes, the BMA have been highly inconsiderate of their colleagues, and I don't think they've even thought about patients.
Yes, Brown for the...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Fred is eligible for a flu vaccination, but has had his appointment cancelled 3 times due to a lack of vaccines in the local area. Pharmacies and GPs are asked to guess what their need will be, sometimes a year in advance, and without sight of the JCVI's eligibility criteria. So naturally that results in conservative estimates so that they don't have waste. Can the Minister outline what emergency measures the government is taking to get additional vaccines to rural and coastal areas like mine to slow down the crisis that we're seeing in our A&E?
Can I thank the honourable member for her question? There is no shortage of the vaccine, which is why it's even more frustrating for our constituents and for the honourable member, knowing that there are flu vaccines available, but they're just not in the right place at the right time. And I'm extremely sorry to her constituent who suffered that inconvenience and setback 3 times. She's placed her concerns on the record. We will look at what's happened in her constituency and look at supplies, and I'll make sure my department works with her to resolve that situation. More generally, where we have seen reports of shortages or suppliers caught short, we have acted rapidly to remedy that situation.
Rachel, that's good.
Mr. Speaker, and I refer to my register of financial interests as a former leader in a trade union on healthcare, but also as a clinician in respiratory medicine. I'm deeply concerned about patients as we speak right now, and I recognise that the Health Secretary shared a lot of information on Wednesday evening with the House about how he wants to take things forward. Could he set out the process of engagement, not least perhaps engaging ACAS, in order to sit down with the BMA and to work through those proposals to see if they could be enhanced or tweaked to see that a right resolve is brought for patients and the NHS, and not least to abate these forthcoming strikes?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for her question. Mr. Speaker, I've lost count of the number of times I've met with the BMA personally, spoken on the telephone, including as recently as this afternoon with the chair of the Resident Doctors Committee and his predecessors. Of course, we're always willing to consider bringing in people who can help to close the gap between both sides of the table. In the past, the BMA haven't been too fond of ACAS. We'll let this round of strikes pass. That's our first priority now, has got to be managing our way through this period and recovering the NHS into the new year. There will then be, by my reckoning, at least 6 weeks or so without strikes. And of course, we will do our best to resolve the situation with the BMA. I would just say to my honourable friend, to the House and to the BMA itself, that there really isn't much further for the government to go. We've given a 28.9% pay rise already. The BMA wants to talk about future years' pay, but we haven't even had a recommendation from the DDRB, so I think it's extraordinary that they are out on strike on pay after the 28.9% pay rise. On jobs, The BMA peddled to their members the idea that there were just 4,000 extra specialty training places up for grabs and seemed to completely sideline the point about emergency legislation to deal with UK graduate prioritisation, which is exactly what they'd asked us to do in all of the meetings that I had with them. And since they have rejected that offer, they shouldn't expect to see the legislation. If they want to see the government move forward constructively with them, then they really need to stop striking, stop harming the NHS, and maybe start thinking about patients while they're at it.
Bradley Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, these strikes at a time of peak seasonal pressure on the NHS are reprehensible, and the BMA should be thoroughly ashamed of themselves. Does the Health Secretary agree with me that we should use this opportunity to reassert our collective societal trust in vaccines and encourage anyone who's vulnerable or eligible to get a vaccine to mitigate the effects on them and the effects on wider society? And given the Health Secretary's comments a moment ago that there's not much more the government can offer, does he at least acknowledge that the government's unconditional inflation-busting offer last year, just weeks after they came into office, surely must have emboldened the BMA?
Can I thank the honourable member for being helpful in two different ways. Firstly, it is always good to see voices from the right making the case for vaccine uptake, and that places the Conservative Party in stark contrast to the anti-science nonsense we hear peddled by Reform UK. And secondly, can I also thank him for reminding resident doctors and the BMA of what they used to have with the Conservative Party, and maybe I don't look so unreasonable after all.
Red Toppers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to place on record my immense thanks to staff at Derriford Hospital in Plymouth who are working tirelessly to keep people safe during the busiest winter yet. And I'm sure the Secretary of State might want to join me in those thanks. But the South West has seen a 93% increase in the number of beds taken up by flu just compared to last year. So does the Secretary of State agree that in the run-up to Christmas, this is a dangerous and reckless time for doctors to go on strike? And what would he say to all the other staff at Derriford who are going to have to take up that work on the front line as we approach Christmas?
So stay.
Can I thank my honourable friend? First of all, thank the staff of the Derriford Hospital. I've visited a number of times over the years and I've seen them coping with pressures at the height of summer, during peak tourist season and in the depths of winter, where I was this time last year. They do a really good job in very difficult circumstances, and my honourable friend champions them regularly and consistently, publicly and privately. He's absolutely right about the challenges that we're facing in our urgent emergency departments. Our UEC plan addresses the underlying issues that he raises, but of course we've got more to do in the coming weeks to help manage the NHS through this winter, and we are already reflecting now on how we will plan for next winter too.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm here this afternoon of resident doctors who are not BMA members, who plan to go to work as we would urge them to do, who are being pressured and bullied by the BMA not to go to work, including being told that locum doctors have been booked in their place at huge extra cost to the NHS. So does the Secretary of State join me in absolutely condemning this pressure and this bullying by the BMA?
No member of staff should be bullied for going to work this week and doing the right thing by patients. And I'm really grateful to resident doctors who've been at work in previous strike actions, and I hope we will see resident doctors do the same this week. I ask resident doctors, regardless of their views on the offer that this government has made, to think really carefully about the risks that the BMA are playing with, and I use that term advisedly, by choosing to schedule strikes this week. It would have been the most reasonable thing for the BMA to accept the offer of extending their strike mandate and simply postponing their strikes into January. I think it would have reflected well on the BMA. It would have shown that they had care and consideration for their colleagues under pressure this week. It would have shown they had care and consideration for patients who risk suffering this week because of their action. It is for the BMA to answer now why they rejected that perfectly reasonable offer and why it is they have chosen the most dangerous time to be out on strike. I actually think it's probably the most shameful episode in the BMA's history since they marched against the foundation of the NHS in the first place.
Neil Coyle.
Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State and his whole team for all they're doing to fix the NHS, including boosting the number of appointments by more than was in our manifesto last year. But in Southwark, one particular NHS pressure is on GP access. Southwark Council is helping expand and improve provision. But how does the government ensure GP practices self-reported access times, that 4 in 5 people can see a GP within 2 weeks, is accurate and heading in the right direction?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is part of GP's contractual obligations, and accurate reporting is absolutely central, both from an ethics and integrity perspective, but also it helps to inform us about the state of the service and how we can improve care for patients. I'm very happy to look at the situation in my honourable friend's constituency with the ICB to make sure that data and information is being collected and provided accurately for him and for public consumption.
Sir Julian Lewis.
I hope the Secretary of State will give a little more consideration to the rather important point I thought raised by his honourable friend from Walthamstow about 16 and 17-year-olds not being able to be vaccinated. But can he tell me this? If any junior doctor, whether or not a member of the BMA, but particularly if a member of the BMA decides on ethical grounds to go into work during the period of this strike and is then faced with sanctions by the BMA, will the government protect him or her?
Two things. Firstly, we will certainly give serious consideration to the point made by my honourable friend for Walthamstow. The JCVI will do that in the usual way, and we follow their advice. But secondly, resident doctors have been to work on previous rounds of strikes. I have not been made aware of bullying or intimidation of individuals who did. Of course, if that is happening, it shouldn't be. Of course, if that is happening, my priority will be to protect doctors who are doing the right thing. My expectation is that no one will be intimidated for going to work and applying a moral and ethical judgment that it's the right thing to do by patients, by their fellow colleagues and by the NHS this Christmas.
Sarah Coombs.
Speaker. This government was elected to pick the NHS back off its knees, and that's exactly what we are doing by putting tens of billions extra into the NHS, including a 28.9% pay rise for doctors, which is delivering a 20% reduction in the NHS waiting list in my area. Despite this progress, we are seeing families worried by the spectre of these strikes and a super surge in flu. I know the Secretary of State is working flat out to support the NHS, but what can families in Sandwell do to support the NHS, including taking up a vaccine at this time?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. People can check their eligibility for the vaccine online or via the NHS